Do you think that there is a maldistribution of resources between schools and CMS?
From personal experience, it's hard to speak on that only because my experience has been within this school for 5 years. I know of other schools that definitely do not have anywhere close to the amount of resources that we have just within our own school. It's frustrating within an entire district to see the level of disparity between resources given to each. Our experience is, Chromebooks for every single student. We have access to resources brought to us from other people. Overall, we have a really supportive, for the most part, parent group that will provide tutoring services, volunteer time, resources for the classroom, but you have to consider the area in which you are. So the location of our school, the makeup of our student body population, which has shifted within recent years, but still is relatively consistent. You go to various schools within CMS, Hidden Valley, James Martin, things like that. There is a marked difference between the resources available to those students and our students. You have to consider their location, student body makeup, parental involvement, all of these things. So from my personal viewpoint, it's difficult for me to say yes because I have seen XYZ, but it's definitely there. It is definitely there. It is pronounced. Especially with CMS being one of the largest districts in North Carolina, you're going to have that disparity. You're going to have schools that are constantly being given access to materials and resources on a regular basis. They have the funding for it. They have the volunteer manpower for it. They have all of those things that other schools just don't have.
As an educator, have you seen a difference in how an African American student is disciplined versus a white student?
Without question. Within our school alone, the majority of our students are students of color, particularly black students. North Carolina is considered one of the southern states. A few years ago, the Penn Graduate School of Education did an entire study on about 3,000 different school districts. And 1.2 million students who were black were suspended in one school year. 55% of those students, the whole population, were suspended in just 13 southern states. That included Kentucky, Georgia, North Carolina was included. So it's interesting to see that marked difference between you have 1.2 million black students being suspended across the nation, yet 55% of that number is only within 13 states, only southern states. Something else to consider is that of the 3,000 districts that were polled, only 20.9 of those students were actually black. So you have 20.9% that are students of color, but they make up 55% of the suspensions within 13 states of the entire nation. So, and even within our own school. Just last week, there was a fight between two students. There was a black student in my homeroom and a white student in my homeroom. The black student had 3 days of suspension, and yet the white student had been antagonizing and kind of pressuring and, all right, let's go, we'll go ahead and do this. And he was here the next day. So those kinds of things, that is in existence. It always has been. And it is incredibly frustrating because without outright telling our black students, it's basically telling them that no matter what you do, you will receive these consequences. And your consequences will be massive compared to the consequences of your white classmates. All it does is contribute to this marked school to prison pipeline that many schools, specifically in the southern states, constantly see. And it just contributes to this subliminal message and sometimes outright message to our students of color, particularly our black students, that we are not here to service you. We're here to contain you, and we're here to manage you, and we're here to make sure that you're doing the right thing. Especially by punishing for things that white students do, that Asian students do, that Hispanic students do, and just as an educator, it is incredibly frustrating. But it's also very interesting to see that these issues are much larger and more pronounced in your southern states. That's when you get into that issue of systemic racism that is still embedded into our entire nation, and has been for years. I don't think ever will go away, unless we're really making some massive changes. But it's so much larger than Black students are punished more than white students, because you're talking about innate bias. You're talking about cultural differences. You're talking about human nature of being afraid of what we don't know. So we're just going to shut it out. And if a white teacher does not know how to handle, for example, I was having a conversation with a white student who found out that our school was going to be part of a rezoning yet again. We're supposed to get students from this school and this school and this school. How are we going to deal with them? Like, that is your number one indication when you're using phrases like them and things like that just contribute to these massive, massive issues that you see the physical impact of when a Black student is suspended for getting in a fight with a white student, and the white student is here the very next day. There's a marked difference, but I found it very interesting that of those suspensions, most of them are happening within those southern states. All that is doing is repeating history. That's all you're looking at here. Mm-hmm.
Research shows that high stress, high stakes, standardized testing is inefficient in testing the intellect and ability of students, but yet we still do it. Why?
People are crazy. There are two sides to this argument, I think. You've got a pro side, you've got a con side. The pros of standardized testing are that it helps teachers with instructional planning. So, we're handed basically a guideline of these are the things that you need to be covering per grade level so that you're not seeing a massive overlap. You're not teaching sixth graders what third graders already learned or things like that. You also have a lot of less wasted instructional time because, you're given this guideline of these are the topics that need to be covered. This is what each student should be able to do. So there's not really a whole lot of room for error, if you will, when it comes to providing that immediate instruction. Those parts can be good. It also helps keep schools accountable because a lot of times schools are being impacted based off of those test scores. So if you're getting grants, if you're getting any sort of monetary gain, be it federal or local, a lot of that is kind of contingent upon how the school does from those standardized tests. So, that's when you get that pressure for, okay, let's make sure we do well, but it is still a benefit for, if you're achieving and you're getting these benefits, okay, good. The issue in and of that, however, on your con side, is that all it does is completely diminish any sense of autonomy in a classroom. Teachers are basically forced to teach to a test. You will have different facilitators who will come in and, these are the things that we're going to use. This is the textbook we're going to use. This is the, and all of a sudden it's almost as if teachers are just expected to, you're going to teach from a textbook because that is what's perfectly aligned to the standards. And that's what you're going to do. You're taking away the autonomy. You're taking away any idea of creativity in a classroom. There are just a lot of things that are then revoked from the rights of the teacher. Not only that, but when you sit and take a standardized test as a student, especially when you consider like their last 2 weeks of school, you have test after test after test, and they're considered high stakes because it's basically telling the kid, if you fail, you're not going to the next grade level. You can't monitor a kid who is now classified McKinney-Vento as of this morning, and yet he has to sit down and take a reading EOG because his scores are going to be terrible. He doesn't know where he's going home that day. You can't take into consideration how much work the teacher is also putting into her students outside or his students outside of these 12, 13 standards. So you've got two different sides of this argument. But I definitely think the frustration for a lot of educators kicks in when you are discussing, the fact that we have so many. We're giving some type of mandated assessment twice a quarter, sometimes 3 times a quarter. We have this year because there's a new thing that we've, been a guinea pig school for. So now we're doing it 3 times a quarter. And those tests take up to 2 full days. So there's just an increase in them. And it's, from my perspective, it's more about how can we get the data so that we can funnel this in through money. And if you're not meeting the data, that's where it goes back to your original question of, where are those disparities in resources just within one district. If your school's not measuring up based off of this data, and we keep giving you tests, so you should be measuring up, the fewer tests that you give, the better your data is going to be. But that just becomes a larger conversation with lawmakers, with NCDPI, with all these groups that are way up here. So when, rather than having the discussion with those who are, ground level in the trenches, if you will, they're making these decisions based off of, well, if you can't meet the data, let's give you another test and see if you can meet this. If you can't meet that one, we'll give you another one. If you can't meet that one, we'll give you another one. And the kids just become tested out. The teachers are tested out. They start teaching to a test rather than teaching because they want to and because they're creative and passionate. So it's a very large issue. There are multiple facets to it, but it is definitely a large issue for sure. Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that teachers should be trained in mental health recognition so that we could genuinely help students who are suffering from a mental illness?
Absolutely, no questions asked. We teach a variety of students on a regular basis. You can be middle school and high school, and you could see up to 130 kids a day. Elementary, you could see the same, 30 to 40 students a day. You are interacting with completely unique individuals, all with unique needs, aside from, a differentiated level of instruction. That is beside the point. If we as educators, as people who are expected and required to provide every source of education for these students when it comes to mental awareness, academic awareness, athletic awareness, all of these things that we are in charge of, we should not be expected to be in charge of them if we're not going to then be given the training and the resources that we need to best serve our students. We are not best serving our students if we are being told to teach to a text in a textbook, because our students are so much more complex than that. We as adults are more complex than a textbook or than one simple conversation or one facet of our being. So if we as teachers, as janitors, as cafeteria workers, as counselors, as administrators, every single individual who is in a classroom or is in a school building, if we're not given this training on a regular basis, we're not going to notice when our kids truly need the help. And that's going to create so many larger issues than just, oh, they didn't help the student. So many larger issues.
So school safety has been brought into the spotlight due to recent events. And what do you think is the best option that we can pursue moving forward to keep our schools safe?
So actually, NPR published an article 2 days ago that was highlighting school safety. And there was a conversation that was taking place between two university professors, both of whom are specialists in gun safety and gun rights and gun activism, just making sure that they understand all the facets of it. Their research, their conversation, which took place over 2 weeks, focused on not hardening schools, but making them quote unquote softer by improving the social and emotional health of the schools. It's the idea of going out into the community and doing your community healthcare program. So rather than waiting for everybody all of a sudden to have the flu, you go out into the community and do the preventative measures that you would need to take in order to prevent an outbreak of the flu. You are making sure that people have access to the flu shot. You're making sure that people are eating fruits and vegetables. You're passing out copious amounts of water, things like that that would naturally prevent any sort of health impairment. So rather than waiting, you're taking those preventative steps. Before you have somebody who walks in who has any sort of intention to harm any person within a building, what preventative measures were taken beforehand. Those are the kinds of things that we need to be looking at. And reading the article, I found myself in complete agreement, because it is so much larger than, let's go ahead and put, metal detectors and more police officers and arming the teachers and all these things. Those are reactive rather than proactive. Those decisions are only being made because this situation keeps coming up. We are not deciding as a nation and then as locally run governments what we need to do before things take place. We're not taking that step. And I wholeheartedly agreed with their conversation, with this entire article. It's so much larger than that, and it should be more about what can you do as a preventative measure rather than a reactive measure. How are we making sure that we're improving the social health of our students, the emotional health of our students, all of these things that, as educators, we are in charge of, but we need to be able to do it in the right way. So I would wholeheartedly agree with making sure that that social and emotional health is done first. Don't make our schools even more of a prison than they are already designed to be. Make them more of a home for our students where we're taking those preventative measures. They know that they're safe because we've done everything behind the scenes and before anything could happen, rather than waiting for something to happen and now we've got to figure out what to do.
So then going off of that, some people have been pushing for teachers to be armed, and would you feel comfortable with having a firearm in your classroom?
Absolutely not. absolutely not. And this is coming from a person who I was raised with a family who hunted on a pretty regular basis. So guns were not an unfamiliar thing for us. But you have to take into account human and natural response. You have officers who go out and do their job every single day, and yet they are specially trained, and we still see issues with that. You have members of the military, my father being one, who are specially trained, and yet you still have human emotion and human reaction that kick in. As educators, we're given, an hour and a half for a regular PD session on how to use Canvas. So what are we going to do? An hour and a half for this is how you actively use a gun and this is how you will protect your kids. Like, that's not how this works. And it's not a matter of take a whole summer and we're going to go to shooting ranges and we're going to give you this training from special forces and, anything. That's not going to change anything. It is not going to make anything better. If anything, I feel you're going to have more issues if you have more people in a building who are armed. You cannot guarantee the student safety. It doesn't matter if, because some people have the argument of, well, you need to keep it in a locked safe or in this, that, and the other thing. That's beside the point. It is still within the vicinity of the students 24/7. So what we're doing is continuously, subliminally pushing this agenda and this mindset of school is designed to keep you down. School is designed to program you to be threatened. School is designed for a school to prison pipeline. You're now bringing guns in. You're now bringing more officers. I mean, it's exactly the same every single time. It's not going to solve the issue. Teachers they may feel that, okay, I feel more protected because I have a gun on my person. It's not really going to do much. I mean, literally last week there was a report that a teacher was legally armed and her safety was off when she went to the restroom. She shot herself in the leg on accident. Those kinds of things will happen 24/7 just because of human error, just because as we are given with everything else, we're given an hour and a half for a training session and then we're expected to perform. So it's not going to help. It is going to make things worse. It will make things worse because that is reactive rather than proactive every single time.
How can everyday people help improve the schools that surround them?
I think that becomes a lot of community involvement. I think that becomes a lot more of the community itself making a concerted effort to become involved in the school environment. Getting a little bit more personal with our school specifically, this year we are now faced with the challenge of people who are our immediate neighbors within this neighborhood, people who are immediate community partners. They're getting concerned with the change in leadership, with the rezoning that has taken place, with a few other outside factors. Our school dynamic is slowly changing. So you have a lot more people who are petrified to send their children here. Well, I heard that there's more of this. I heard that there's more of this. I heard. So when a community goes based off of I heard, and doesn't come in and see what we're doing, and they don't meet and interact with some of the amazing individual kids that we have here, that creates a larger issue. You're going based off of he said, she said. You're not going directly to the source. You're deliberately making the choice to not be invested. So I think when it comes to reshaping perception, and when it comes to helping schools improve, community involvement has to be a shared goal. It could be schools hoping open forum nights for the community. This school is hosting essentially like an open mic, if you will. Community members, you're more than welcome. Neighborhood members, you're more than welcome. If you're a parent of a student, you're more than welcome. Let's just have 2 hours where we share some of our concerns, we share some suggestions for improvement, and we really take the time to listen to one another, because schools and communities should not be separate. A school is in a community for a reason. And if you're pulling those same students from that community to go to this facility where they are expected to teach and take care of your children before they get sent back home, it should be a community effort. It's the entire idea of it takes a village to raise a child. So I think, individual schools kind of making that effort, making more of an effort to make the communication between school and community more two-way than one-way, but then taking more opportunities outside of school hours to provide the community with as much information as possible, allow the community to give feedback and grow together as a community rather than separate entities where you have expectations of both but neither are met because there's no clear line of communication. I think that would make huge strides in kind of helping build the schools within the neighborhoods themselves. Future advice for educators. Whether you are a freshman in college or you are 40 years old, you want to be lateral entry. If you wake up in the morning and you question why you're getting up, you need to go ahead and exit the profession immediately. This will be some of the hardest work that you will do as a person because there is a lot of emotion involved in education. You learn very quickly to manage that emotion. You learn very quickly to compartmentalize to make sure that you can give your all to your students. But if you already know that you are somebody who cannot compartmentalize, if you know that you're somebody who does not like to work incredibly hard, if you are somebody who knows that this is more of, I get 2.5 months off in the summer, I would respectfully ask you to leave immediately. Because it is so much larger. That would be the first piece of advice. If you truly do not feel this in your soul, you need to leave. There will be moments, there will be years where you struggle and you don't feel it in your soul. But at that point, it then becomes, what are you doing to fix it? Are you in an environment that is suppressing your authenticity? Are you in an environment in which you are not appreciated for the educator that you are? Those types of situations you can find yourself out of. But if you are going into this right now, and you're picking education because you feel that it's going to be the easiest thing you've done, it's going to be easier than, being a financial advisor or being a lawyer, you pick the wrong thing, you need to leave. Second piece, being more positive and fluffy, is to enjoy the entire process and do what you can to enjoy the process, because it is so much fun to sit down and try to come up with the most outrageous creative activity that you can think of. There are going to be days where you're like, just put in Google Classroom and just sit. There are going to be days like that. But enjoy the entire process of, I have this really awesome idea, I want to share it with you. Enjoy the process of, oh my gosh, one of my students just said the most outrageous thing, you've got to listen to this. And just take every single day as a brand new opportunity to get to know a kid on a completely different level. Because every single day is different in education. Your agenda might be very similar to the structure of yesterday, but every single day is different. So enjoy that entire process and just be excited that you get to spend time with growing people. You get to spend time with individuals who are changing and who are wanting to mature and grow and learn, and they're counting on you. So enjoy that entire process, enjoy the relationships that you can build with your kids, and try to build those relationships with your kids, because other than that, they are not going to care. If you have the relationships with them where they're coming up to you every morning because they want to start their day with you, or they stay late and they want to crash your planning period, enjoy those moments, because you're not going to have them all the time. You might have moments of crazy PLC groups or data that you have to sit and talk about for 3 hours and things like that. So it's just enjoy every single moment that you get where you can interact with a student in a very personal way, because that helps to contribute to, I know exactly why I get up in the morning. It's for Caroline, it's for Jermaine, it's for Tristan, it's for Isaiah, it's for Cameron. It's, why you're getting up, because you've taken the time to enjoy those moments. So I would give those two. If you're not in it, leave. And then once you are, and you know that you are, enjoy every single second and remind yourself that those amazing, annoying, hilarious, frustrating kids, they are the reason that you get up in the morning, because they're amazing individuals.
So what y'all just watched was an interview that I conducted with Miss Tamayo. And she is a teacher that I volunteer and observe under every single week. And her passion for education is just overflowing. And when I found out about this social justice project, I knew that I wanted to keep it within the education realm. And I knew that I had to talk to her about this. And after talking to her about what social justice looks like, it really cleared up how I see it and how I define it. And I see it as the equal opportunity, distribution of resources, an overall experience for all students, no matter their race, gender, socioeconomic status, geographic location. None of those factors should influence their learning experience. It should all be equal. As educators, as education systems, as a community, we should constantly be striving to give all students, all kids, the best opportunity to learn and to grow and to thrive in school. So I obviously believe that all students' learning experiences should be the best that they can possibly be. And I really think that starts at the individual level. Everyone can go volunteer in schools, whether it be through North Star Reading, communities in schools, or just volunteering in general. You'll get these opportunities to build relationships with students, staff, and administration that can last you a lifetime. The same goes for classes. You can go as a class to a school and volunteer and just interact with students, and they love to see that. They love to see college kids coming into their classes and just talking to them. They love that support and that mentor to look up to. And the exact same thing goes for community members. There is always a need for volunteers in the school. So whether your child goes to the school or not, your help would go so far. Whether you are in a classroom or not, your help does not go unnoticed, and it is very much needed. So whether you're by yourself with a class or just out in the community, go to the schools, ask how you can help, because there's always a way that you can. You just have to get out there and do it. And the exact same thing goes for the community. Whether your child goes to the school or not, the schools always need your help. Volunteering in or out of the classroom, your help would mean the world, and they always need it. So whether you're in an individual or a class or just out in the community, go ask the schools how you can help. They always need it. Don't be afraid to ask how you can help. In the classroom, out of the classroom, interacting with students, teachers, staff, other parents, it means the world, and it can make a difference. So don't be afraid to do it. Thank you guys so much for watching. It means the world.